Trump has started the negotiations with Russia, with Iran. Yet at the same time, a lot of people say that that the U.S. under Trump is stepping back from global leadership.
Well, America can't be great again if America steps back from global leadership. And I do think Trump thinks of himself as a world historic player and a world historic leader. And he can't do that if he's in retreat and stepping back and only worrying about what goes on within the borders of America, as important as all those issues absolutely are. He's gotten frustrated with the Russia-Ukraine talks, but as we discussed, I'm hoping he's realizing that Zelensky is not the problem. Zelensky has said, I'll do what you want to do. And you want a minerals agreement? I'll give you a minerals agreement, which he has, which, by the way, I think is a positive step, because America is making an investment and a commitment to an independent Ukraine. That deal doesn't go anywhere if Russia takes over Ukraine. So I think that was a good step, for sure. If Trump should say, I've tried to get some kind of peace negotiation, ceasefire, I'm frustrated with it, I'm stepping away, that's okay with me if he continues to supply munitions and weaponry needed by the Ukrainians. He doesn't have to give it for free. He can sell it. Lots of ways the Ukrainians can pay for it. Lots of ways the Europeans can pay for it with their own funds, or guess what? There's $300 billion of Russian sovereign wealth frozen in Europe. I think it makes great sense to use that for rearming Ukraine and for reparations to Ukraine for the war crimes committed against it by Russia. So there's all kinds of ways. And if we're selling munitions to Ukrainians, that's good for us. It's good for our factories, good for our workers, good for the defense industrial base here in America, which urgently needs to be expanded. The Ukraine war has taught us this. We should be the arsenal of democracy again. Don't have to give it away. We can sell it. And that makes perfect. We need more for ourselves. People don't realize we're not mostly writing checks to Ukraine all this time. What we're doing is we're sending them old weapons and then making for ourselves new weapons.
How do you understand the relationship between Trump and Putin? You know, a lot of people have said it seems alarmingly warm. What is your take on that relationship?
You know, it's a good question. It's a hard question to say. I think, though I don't understand it, that Putin has a certain charm. Think back, you know, President Bush saying, I looked in his eyes and I got a glimpse of his soul. And others have said he's a serious man. I mean, I don't see him as charming. I don't see him as, but I'm sure he exudes power in a certain way and a kind of machismo. People find that attractive. Perhaps President Trump does. He may think he got along well with him, but I think I kind of feel like I've been watching Putin as a sort of amateur Putinologist for the past 20 years, and I think he's about as ruthless as anybody can be, and kind of a gangster and kind of a thug. And I don't think he's look. He has an ideology, and I understand that it's an ideology based on restoring the Russian Empire. I mean, that's in a way understandable. If he thinks of himself as a czar, what must be his mission as a czar? To restore the Russian Empire. And if you want to restore the Russian Empire, what does that mean? You have to be czar of all the Russias. What are all the Russias? Well, it's Russia. It's certainly Belarus, like Russia. It's certainly Ukraine, the frontier of Russia. But eventually it also means all the other parts of the Russian Empire. That means Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Finland, Poland for sure. If you talk to people in Eastern Europe, talk to people in the Baltics, they totally get that. And I do hope they're, you know, making that case persuasively to President Trump, to Mr. Witkoff, and to other advisors to the president. Because if you understand what he wants, Putin shouldn't have what he wants. Putin wants victory. He wants to conquer Ukraine. He wants to drag Ukraine into the Russian Empire, of which he believes he is the czar. He wants them bowing and obeying the Kremlin. And the Ukrainians want to have what they have had, an independent and sovereign nation state and a separate culture. Among other things, my most recent visit to Ukraine was for their last election. I was one of the official election observers. Ukrainians were very proud of themselves. They had political parties, they had free press, they were following procedure in conducting their elections like a Western democracy. And they were proud of that. You think they want to give all that up? I don't think they do. And we shouldn't want them to have to give that up. We shouldn't want to see any free democratic nation conquered and dragged into a dictatorship by military force. I don't think that's in the American interest, and I certainly don't think it's consistent with American values myself. But do I think I do see Trump becoming somewhat more realistic? It's understandable. You think, I want peace. Surely they want peace. No, you got to understand everybody is not like you, and Putin is not.
And your take, if I understand it correctly, is that the war will probably end up something like a Korea North and South.
I would like to see Ukraine victorious, but I think that's probably not very realistic at this point. What's more likely is that you get a ceasefire, and the ceasefire becomes what we sometimes call a frozen conflict. And in a frozen, you have an armistice. You don't have peace. And what you're referring to in Korea is there was a Korean War. It didn't end in peace or path to peace. It ended with a frozen conflict, an armistice, and that was 70 or in 1953, over 70 years ago, and that's still the case. And let me tell you, Kim Jong-un, who is the dynastic dictator of North Korea, still wants to take the South, and might have by now if it weren't for the fact that we have thousands of American troops, I think at last count like 28,000, in South Korea, so he knows he'd be tangling with the U.S. Now, I do worry. Kim Jong-un has been providing Putin with munitions, artillery, he makes a lot of them, and troops, many of whom are dead now. He gets something back from that. What might that be? I was talking to somebody from South Korea the other day, and he said, here's my guess, technology for submarines so they can fire nuclear weapons. Right. That's a serious problem that we have there. I think a real danger that I would like to and hope to impress upon people on the in this administration is that if Putin were to succeed in Ukraine, I don't think that would be the end of his ambitions. I don't think he would say, now I can retire and worry about yoga and eating right for the next few years. I think what he would do is he would say, what do I want next? And I think that's what the Poles and Estonians are. Lithuanians, I think, need to be particularly concerned. Why? Because there's a province, or an oblast of Russia called Kaliningrad that is not contiguous with Russia. It's on the other side of Belarus. Where did it come from? Well, it used to be part of Prussia and part of Germany, but the Soviets took it from them at the end of World War II. It's where the Russian Baltic Fleet is. I can easily see, you easily imagine, just as Putin wants a land bridge to Crimea, he says, I need a land bridge to Kaliningrad, and that either is southern Lithuania, a strip, or northern Poland, a strip through to get there from Belarus. And then that's an attack against a NATO ally. Do we fight for a road through southern Lithuania? If not, NATO collapses. If NATO collapses, what will Putin think? I earned my keep today. I earned my salary. And let me tell Xi Jinping what I just did, because he'll be very happy with me.
Trump has said that he doesn't want U.S. troops on the ground. Do you see the work that France and Germany are doing? Do you think that they're capable of stepping up to this? That's one. And two, you brought up the issue of NATO. Trump has spoken critically of NATO, and there is some concern. Bolton has said this, that he thinks Trump would exit NATO. What's your take on that?
Yeah, one is, do I think France and Britain and other NATO countries can step up? Yes, I do. Do I think they must step up? Yes, I do. They, as quickly as they can, I would say they should be stepping up. And I give credit here. Britain and France have both indicated that if you get a ceasefire and a frozen conflict and an armistice like we were talking about, that they'd be willing to send peacekeepers, which means their troops, to ensure that that ceasefire held. Putin doesn't want that, of course he doesn't want that, but he should not really have say in it. They'd probably, fine if they're on both sides of the ceasefire line, but if the Ukrainians say we want these troops here to help us, and That's his choice. It's still a sovereign, independent nation. Putin doesn't get to say what the Ukrainians can do on their territory, at least on the territory that he hasn't conquered. I think we do need, and I think Trump is right to want every NATO member to contribute meaningfully to the collective security of the alliance. It can't be an entitlement that America protects you and you do what you want to do. It can't be. I think they're getting that message. It may be that Trump is trying to scare them to make them sure that they have to know he's serious about this. Otherwise, he won't do it. They won't do it because they never did before. Or maybe he does feel, we don't need to protect Europe. But I'm not sure that's the case. I think there's some fear that's the case.
Do you see the push on tariffs against allies similar to his posture with respect to NATO, that he's trying to, he's using this tough language with the tariffs to kind of goad them into better deals with us, and he's not intending to really harm the relationship with allies?
From a national security position, I would make a big distinction between our adversaries and our friends, but our friends shouldn't take advantage of us. I'm kind of old school. I think low tariffs and free trade are good. We should have free trade agreements. I think a free trade agreement with the British, with the EU, that's probably good for both of us. I certainly want to be able to buy fruits and vegetables in the winter from Mexico. But he has many things on his agenda. From a national security point of view, most important, it seems to me, is that we not have any strategic supply chains coming from adversaries such as China. Pharmaceuticals, don't want that. You don't want them to be able to cut us off. You don't want hardware or software in our weapon systems or in our ports. You don't want TikTok in our phones. That's very dangerous. All of that with those who are our allies, I think it should be a different kind of negotiation. It should be what's in our interest and what's in your interest. There's a tension, at least, it seems to me, in terms of the two basic phrases of this administration. A tension, not a contradiction. One is America first. What's good for America? I'm the American president. That's what people elected me to think about what's good for America. There's also make America great again. For America to be great again, we have to be a presence in the world. For America to be great again, we cannot be displaced as the preeminent nation by communist China. And what we do know is Xi Jinping wants to displace us as the most prominent, as the preeminent nation on earth, as the leader or the ruler of a new world order in which they make the rules and they're illiberal. That's what he wants. I don't think that you can't make America great and essentially lose the Cold War. Why do I say lose the Cold War? Because we think we won the Cold War because the Soviet Union collapsed. If it was a Cold War only against the Soviet Union, that's true, but was it that, or was it a Cold War against communism? And the strongest communist party in the world is in Beijing right now. And it is in what we would call here at FDD an axis of aggressors, a no-limits partnership between Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin, very close economic and military relations between Putin and Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of Tehran, and relations of all three of them, and with North Korea also with Tehran and other places. North Korea is a proliferator of weapons and nuclear technology, as well as we mentioned, munitions and bodies to Russia. So we have these axis of aggressors. This is, I think, a Cold War we're in. Cold War 2.0, call it. And that's not just my conception. Neil Ferguson, the great historian, was saying this as early as 2018. Does anybody see what's going on? We're in a Cold War. It's a more challenging Cold War than the last one. Our defense budget doesn't reflect that, and a lot of our policies don't yet reflect that. And I think that's very important that it does, and that's part of the advice we'd be giving to this and arguing to this administration. We should have a defense. Yes, our allies need to up their defense budgets and their capabilities, military capabilities, so they're really serious partners. But we need to do more as well if we're going to win this Cold War. I don't think President Trump wants to go down in history as somebody who lost Cold War 2.0.
Is there a danger that he rubs the allies the wrong way at a time when adversaries are are working together. They are not necessarily allies, but they are working together. And so they're coming closer together, and it seems some would say that we are parting a little bit. Is that
So
a valid concern that we're?
It's a valid concern. Look, I do think that our adversaries are allied. I don't think it's purely transactional. Yeah, there are real differences in Chinese communism and Iranian Islamism and whatever it is in North Korea and the kind of neo-imperialism of Putin, but they have common goals for the next few years. And the most important is to diminish the power of the U.S. and marginalize the U.S. and make the U.S. a great nation no more, a great power no more. That's what they want to do. They're allied for that cause. I think, yes, it's a little bit dangerous for sure, but if it means that the French and the Germans and the British say we have to step up, we can't depend on it, we have to do more, you know what? That can be a good thing, and we can get back together when we're more equal.
You just raised the question about possibly allowing Iran to enrich a small amount of uranium. I think Witkoff had mentioned this, and it led to concern among some that Trump might allow this. What is your take on that?
As we were discussing earlier, there's a lot of things that Witkoff has to kind of master, and nuclear physics is among them. And he's backed off from that. Right now, what we're hearing, and I'm very glad about this, from Trump, from Witkoff, from Senator Cotton, from Marco Rubio, from almost everybody, they're using the same word and with the same meaning. The Islamic Republic of Iran must dismantle its nuclear weapons program. Dismantle. Dismantle means no enrichment, no reprocessing, zero. Can they have a civilian nuclear power program? They can. There are, if I remember correctly, 23 countries in the world that have civilian nuclear power, but they don't enrich, they don't reprocess, they import fuel rods for that purpose. Now, I don't think, and Trump has talked about this, that Iran, with its oil resources, needs nuclear power in order to make sure that kindergartens and retirement centers have air conditioning. I don't think they need it. I don't believe they don't need to be putting nuclear power facilities under mountains. They don't need to be developing missiles, including intercontinental missiles, for peaceful purposes, because there are no peaceful purposes. But I think I think what the administration is saying, I think J.D. Vance has said this, including in Munich, suggested this. If they want civilian, peaceful nuclear power, they can have it, but that doesn't require enrichment or reprocessing, and they can't have that. So they need to dismantle verifiably their nuclear weapons program. Verifiably means that the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, gets to go anywhere, anytime, including to military bases, because if you're developing nuclear warheads, gosh, you might want to do that on a military base. So they have to be able to do that as well. That's what they're talking about. And if the Iranians will come along with that and accept that, they don't want to, but if they do, okay, then you can have a deal. If not, then I would hope Witkoff, as we discussed earlier, would say, President Trump, I'm sorry, they're not coming along. I can't achieve the goals you told me to achieve, so we need to go to Plan B.